Dr. K. Vrindha Menon did her doctorate degree in veterinary public health from KVIH. She worked as a research associate in College of Veterinary and Animal Sciences, Manuti, before joining as veterinary surgeon in Animal Husbandry Department. Currently, she is working as assistant professor holding the charge of implementing officer, School of Zoonosis since 2017 and course director of PG diploma course in food safety and quality assurance. Her area of specialization is foodborne zoonotic disease. With these few words, I am welcoming Dr. K. Vrindha Menon to this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Justin. Now I invite the co-chair of the session, Dr. Prajit, Assistant Professor in charge and Head in charge, Department of Veterinary Public Health, College of Veterinary and Animal Science, Book Code, and Officer in charge, Center for One Health Education Advocacy, Research and Training, Kerala Veterinary and Animal Science University, to address the gathering.
Thank you, Rishad. Can you listen? Can you hear?
Yes.
Yeah. We have a good speaker today, Dr. Vrindha Menon. I welcome Dr. Vrindha Menon for this particular session to deliver the one-hour talk on meat-borne zoonosis. We have eminent chairperson here, Dr. Zende, sir. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. I welcome you also, sir. I also welcome all the participants who are here for this particular session. Thank you all. We'll go ahead with the session. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everybody. And respected chair, Dr. Zende, Dr. Prajit, co-chair, and delegates. I, at the onset, thank the organizers for inviting me for addressing or putting my presentation for this session. So the topic for my presentation today is occupational hazards and risk elevation in veterinary practice. Now we all know that the veterinarians and also the people who work in the livestock sector are commonly exposed to various types of occupational diseases. So this is what the definition by WHO goes. Occupational disease is a disease contracted primarily as a result of an exposure to risk factors arising from work activity. And as an introduction to zoonosis, we all know zoonosis are naturally transmitted between vertebrate animals and man. And the veterinarians are more at a risk of contracting zoonosis because we are in constant contact with animals. And 61% of the known human infections are zoonotic. And more than 70% of the emerging zoonosis has wild animals as reservoir host. When we talk about the symptoms of zoonotic diseases in humans, in particular in veterinary practice, we have two ranges which we have as far as diseases are concerned. One is a self-limiting disease. That means whether you go for a treatment or not, anyway you'll get cured. And another is a long-term illness which requires a long-term treatment. Self-limiting diseases are mainly in the foodborne disease groups like, say, staphylococcal infections or campylobacteriosis, etc. Or there can be long-term illnesses which can be brucellosis, TB, etc. So we'll be talking in detail about these diseases. Now, this is a meta-analysis study by Bonini in 2016, where he has put in about the risks to which the veterinarians are put into as far as their occupation is concerned. So when we look at the physical injuries or injuries and trauma, the 23% are injuries and trauma as far as occupational risk to veterinarians are concerned. And ionizing radiation for people who are involved in X-rays or irradiation of meat and things like that, at around 7%. Noise, mainly in the piggery sector, there has been reports of veterinarians affected with these risks of noise pollution, and that is around mere 2%. Chemicals can be of different types. So we'll be discussing the chemical hazards in detail in the coming slides. And we see a whooping 43% of the diseases which are zoonotic in nature to which the veterinarians are exposed to. And the next group is the psychological problem. The psychological problem of late is there in all professions, and now it is picking up as far as veterinarians are concerned. Now, when we talk about the routes of transmission, we have different routes of transmission, as we know, as far as all diseases are concerned. But as far as our profession is concerned, the main route of transmission which we encounter is contact transmission, because of our constant contact with animals, which we can broadly divide into direct and indirect. Direct is by ingestion or through cutaneous, percutaneous, mucous membrane exposure, and that can be through examination or treatment or handling of animals. Whereas indirectly is through hospital environment. So on the environment means the surfaces which get infected with the infected material, which include cages, equipment, workplace services, soil laundries, and things like that. And the next route, which is at present the COVID-19 situation is much into place as far as transmission is concerned, is aerosol transmission. Now, aerosol transmission we can broadly classify into droplet and airborne transmission. Now, this droplet and airborne transmission depends upon the particle size of that particular pathogen. As to if the particle size is bigger, then it is mainly of droplet transmission. That means there will be droplets which will suspend in air and then finally settle down because of the gravitational force. Because the Browning movement is comparatively lesser, whereas more of the gravitational force plays a major role, and then it tends to settle down on the surfaces. So when we work with lancing abscesses or dentistry in veterinary practice, or when we do post-mortem infection, there are more chances of droplet transmission because our close contact is there. We don't have a distance which is safe distance which we keep as far as that particular transmissions are concerned. Now, influenza is one of the examples which we can talk about as far as droplet transmission is concerned. Next is airborne transmission. In this, there are small droplets or particles that remain suspended in air for a long period of time, extended period of time, and they can move along a longer distance, and which when inhaled can cause aerosol or airborne transmission. Now, as far as COVID-19 is concerned, today's newspaper also says now that it is more of airborne transmission as compared to droplet transmission, whereas WHO still maintains that it's a droplet transmission. So there are a lot of controversy on what aerosol transmission is all about as far as COVID is concerned. Next mode of transmission is vector-borne transmission. Vector-borne transmission, because we have a lot of outdoor activities, outdoor work when we handle animals, so we are more prone to flea, tick, and other types of mosquito bites, and these vector-borne diseases can be transmitted as far as occupational risk is concerned. Now, to broadly classify occupational hazards, we can broadly classify into physical, chemical, biological hazards, and ergonomics, that is a scientific study of how you work, and there is a psychological and social factors. First, we'll talk about physical hazards in the livestock sector. So here is a list of things which we come across as far as physical hazards are concerned. From slips, trips, and falls to cuts and pricks, bites, attack by animals, kicks, scratches, stings, and there's a huge list as far as the physical hazards are concerned. Now, mainly with the studies which we have seen and the reports which we have seen, more of physical hazards is on bites, scratches, and injuries caused by animals. That is a prominent physical hazard which has been reported as far as animal handlers or veterinarians are concerned. Another physical hazard is injuries from sharp instruments, especially syringe needles or scalpel blades, nose tongs for cattle, halters, etc. And these pathogens are carried in the mouth of many species. So these animal bites can result into a small infection at that particular site, that is cellulitis or abscess, to sepsis, and it may lead to major infections like endocarditis or central nervous system infection. Another thing which is now coming up as far as veterinarians are concerned is that veterinarians seek treatment only if serious wound occur, because we know the basic principle of treatment, so we don't go in for medical help as far as small wounds are concerned. And small infections are concerned, we do the treatment on our own. But according to recent research, it is said that animal handlers as well as veterinarians, they can harbor a lot of biological agents in their body which can undergo gene mutation, and if the pathogen is zoonotic, it can then inside the body, it can like evolve itself and then become a dreadful zoonotic pathogen. So the evolving of the pathogen inside, so that it can infect and become infectious and become a dreadful zoonotic pathogen inside a human being. So these veterinarians and animal handlers can play a major role. And MERS and swine flu has been reported to have evolved in these type of animal handlers as far as certain reports, research reports are concerned. Now, coming up to the needle stick injuries, these needle stick injuries can result, which is another major important hazard, physical hazard, to inoculation of vaccine containing live organisms, harmful chemicals, hormones, therapeutics, or infective material, and then the pathogens can gain entry. So there are certain reports as far as these injuries are concerned. So in US, the female veterinarians have reported 63.9% of one or more needle sticks after graduation from veterinary college. And when we compare with the wildlife veterinarians and other veterinarians, we find that there is more sharp injuries related to zoo veterinarians. That is, in America, it has been reported to be 86.7%. And the overall exposure rate in Australian veterinarians have been found to be 75.3. And another interesting thing which we see here is because of the complacent behavior of veterinarians as they become senior in practice, that is, the proportion of veterinarians who experience needle stick injuries increases with years of practice. So that is an interesting thing which has been observed. So we need to shed off our complacent behavior and be more careful as far as needle stick injuries are concerned. So we have a lot of infections which can be transmitted through that route, like Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, because these injuries can lead to transmission of the agents through the wound which has resulted on the skin and thereby leading to infections. Now, next is how you prevent this needle stick injuries, which is very much in common. Now, these needle stick injuries were more reported in the healthcare sector after the coming up of HIV infection, because it was a bloodborne infection and there were a lot of health workers being infected with HIV because of this needle stick injuries. So there were a lot of work done in the health sector regarding that. Whereas veterinary sector, when you see, there's not much work done on how much infections are transmitted through needle stick injuries. We don't have a very major pathogen which is coming up as far as bloodborne pathogens through needle sticks are concerned. Now, as a precautionary measure, we should follow certain things which we already know, but we need to follow to prevent the spread of infection. So one is, you should not bend needles, pass on uncapped needles from one person to the other. Needle cap should never be placed in the mouth, nor neither the cap should be removed from the needle by the mouth, which many of our practitioners do. Uncapped needles should never be removed from a syringe by hand, which is practically not possible, but it is recommended. After aspiration of the infectious material or injection of live vaccines, the used vaccine with the needle should be placed in a sharp container. So that is very important, especially in case of brucella vaccines, which are live vaccines. And leaving needles in the laboratory coats should be avoided, especially uncapped needles in laboratory coats are kept and there can be needle stick injuries because of that. Now we come to the next hazard, that is the chemical hazards. So chemical hazards, there are different substances in veterinary practice which may accidentally spill on the skin. It can be inhaled or ingested or injected, and they can cause different hazardous effects. So you can have a series of symptoms which are related to chemical hazard, from mutagenicity to teratogenicity, carcinogenicity. There can be acute toxicity, then flammability if it falls on the skin, or skin irritation, or there can be allergic reactions. On when it is inhaled, it can lead to lung damage. So the intensity or the type of the symptom depends upon the type of chemical which has been inhaled or which has been spilled on the skin or ingested. Now, there have been different drugs which have been related to allergic contact dermatitis in different people as far as veterinarians are concerned. Then antibiotics can act as common sensitizers for different humans, especially the veterinarians. Another interesting thing which has been found in chemical hazard, especially in case of female veterinarians, because of the prostaglandins which have got into the which has been got accidentally injected inside and led to abortions. So early abortion in case of female veterinarians, that has been reported by different countries. It can also cause adverse respiratory infections, which have also been reported as far as prostaglandins are concerned. As far as irradiation is concerned, especially we have the exposure to X-rays, people working in radiology, they can have risk to skin cancer, thyroid cancer, and leukemia. Now, this is a list of different substances which we commonly come across, and then the symptoms which are produced. Another type of chemical hazard which commonly the veterinarians come across is the anesthetic gases or anesthetics which are commonly used, especially in small animal practice, which has led to different types of adverse reactions in case of human beings, with the normal dose leading to headache and nausea to severe types of infections which have been found. Now, similarly, so the another thing is formalin, and for fumigation, when we use those gases, have also found to produce severe effects, especially headaches, nose irritation, watering of eyes, dermatitis, and respiratory problems in very sensitive individuals. Now, the major thing as far as the 43% is concerned, as far as zoonosis is concerned, is mainly biological hazards. So biological hazard, main occupational risk for vets. As we compare with chemical and physical, the biological hazard is the main hazard as far as the occupational risk group is concerned. Now, when the damage is concerned, there are different parameters which are involved. That means for a pathogen to transmit disease and cause an infection in a human, it requires an infection. It depends on the infectious dose, the pathogenicity of the strain, the immune status of the person, then a presence of risk factors, that is whether he or she is undergoing drug treatment, or it depends on the disease or incurrent infection which is there. It also depends upon the age and the physiological state of that particular person. So the symptoms due to different diseases as far as zoonosis is concerned in the occupational group, it varies from person to person. It also varies depending upon the pathogen involved as far as zoonotic diseases are concerned. Then food animals and companion animals are mainly responsible for maximum transmissions which have been reported as far as occupational risk groups of animal handlers and veterinarians are concerned. Then there are also reports of oncogenic virus like papilloma virus leading to esophageal cancer in cattle as well as humans have been reported. Now, this is the list which has been given by International Labour Organization, whereas zoonotic diseases which are occupationally acquired are concerned. So the main disease, zoonosis, is not complete as far as rabies is not concerned. As far as we don't discuss rabies, it is a disease which has been there for decades together, and we have an effective vaccine. We have all the things in place, but still we are not able to eradicate rabies. It still remains a disease in dogs. It still remains a disease as far as humans are concerned, and a major occupational hazard for the veterinary healthcare team as far as rabies is concerned. Now, it can be transmitted by bite or scratch of the animal. Now, as far as we are concerned, the occupational risk groups are concerned, we need to see that there are different categories of bites which we can encounter. One is category 1, another category 2, and the third is category 3 bite. In category 1, there is only licking of the animal and the skin is intact, so there is no broken skin involved. So we just need to wash it properly, and mostly the health people, personals don't recommend a vaccination. Even WHO does not recommend a vaccination in the category 1 state. In category 2, when there is a scratch as seen in the picture, there's a scratch there and the integrity of the skin is lost, then you need to go in for post-exposure vaccination. Category 3, then the complete, not only the integrity of the skin is lost, the flesh comes off and then there is a oozing out of blood, and there can be severe cases when more it is closer to the head, the more severe the transmission and the symptoms will come up very early. So that is a category 3 bite, which is a serious bite, which requires both post-exposure vaccination along with immunoglobulin treatment. So these are the 3 things which we normally encounter as far as veterinarians are concerned. Now, as far as prevention is concerned, everybody knows about the prevention, but I don't know how many veterinarians do have a pre-exposure rabies vaccination done regularly as far as veterinary practice is concerned. One vaccination we always do when we are in college, especially in the final year, and then we move off into practice, and then we completely forget about it until and unless we get a bite from an animal which is suspected of rabies. So that is the normal trend which we have. So we need to really focus on pre-exposure rabies vaccine as far as occupational group is concerned. So the pre-exposure vaccination schedule is 0, 7, 21 or 28 days. So there are 3 vaccines which are there which need to be taken as far as pre-exposure vaccination is concerned. And the antibody response develops between 7 to 10 days. Now, the other problem which we usually encounter is we don't complete the complete schedule. So if you don't complete the complete schedule, there will be incomplete protection if you are exposed to rabies. So we need to complete the complete schedule as far as rabies is concerned. Next is WHO recommends that a single booster rabies vaccine be given when the titer drops below 0.5 international unit per ml. So we need to check it as to what the titer is and then go for the booster vaccination. It is not a lifetime vaccination as far as rabies is concerned, which we normally think like that, and we need to again get ourselves revaccinated as far as rabies is concerned. Another misconception is that if a person is pregnant, they cannot go in for post-exposure vaccine, but pregnancy and infancy are not contraindications for post-exposure prophylaxis. A year back, there has been a report of a pregnant lady being exposed to a rabid dog, but because she was pregnant, she didn't go in for vaccination, and later she died of rabies, although her child could be saved by an emergency cesarean which was done. So these type of things do happen, so we need to be very careful as far as post-exposure prophylaxis schedule and vaccination is concerned. Now, post-exposure vaccination is done in the deltoid muscles in the arm. So 0, 3, 7, 14 and 28 days is the regime. You can also have a 2-1-1 regime, that is 0, 7, 21 days IM. If you are reduced, because these vaccines are expensive, you can reduce the dose of the vaccine by going in for intradermal vaccine. But intradermal vaccine, if you want to do, you should be have a trained person, otherwise it can lead to different complications. Another important point which we need to note is pre-exposure vaccine cannot compensate for hygienic practices which need to be followed as far as veterinarians are concerned. Next, we come to leptospirosis, again a disease which has been there for in this 20th century, 21st century, both leptospirosis is there. And it always comes back when the monsoons come. Again, we have got a lot of diseases. Again, it fades off. And then again, next year, we expect leptospirosis. So leptospirosis, again, a disease which is a major occupational risk as far as any animal handler or veterinarians are concerned. Now, there are more than 250 pathogenic serovars and at least 50 non-pathogenic serovars as far as leptospirosis is concerned. Now, how does it sustain the endemicity, especially in the state of Kerala and other southern states? Is because of its survivability for 152 days in fresh water, 3 to 5 days in damp soil, and not more than 2.5 hours in dry soil. So monsoon season is the best season because the temperature is very conducive, 25-26 degrees centigrade. The dampness is there for its growth. The water is present, so it can very easily thrive during this particular season. Now, doxycycline is a chemoprophylaxis which is being propagated as far as leptospirosis is concerned. Although it is widely used, but luckily, we have no AMR reported because of doxycycline as far as leptospirosis is concerned. So 200 mg orally once weekly can be given for high-risk areas, as far as high-risk group people are concerned. Now, incubation period in humans, it varies from 7 to 12 days and it can go up to 29 days also. Now, the main problem with leptospirosis vaccination is that it protects only against a particular serovar in that vaccine. So that is why we cannot have a vaccine being developed for all the serovars. You can see 250 pathogenic serovar, very difficult to make a vaccine. So every time we need to look into the serovar and see what vaccine serovar should be included in the vaccine as far as vaccination is concerned. So it is not usually followed as far as humans are concerned. So we all fall in the occupation at risk group as far as this particular disease is concerned. Now, when you see the excretion time in urine of leptospirosis, you can see it can be excreted for a very long period of time in the main groups like dogs, pigs, rodents, and cattle. Now, we have done research as far as this particular disease is concerned by our different PG students, and we have found that the seroprevalence as far as microscopic agglutination test, which is the main diagnostic test for the gold standard for leptospirosis, we have found that the seroprevalence in dogs is around 12.75%. That is in healthy dogs. We could find that in humans it was around 8.21%. In dog owners, we found it should be 6.40%. So these are all in the healthy population. We looked into the seroprevalence, and we could find in case of humans, actually it is up to 1:200, which is considered to be positive in the endemic areas, but we found it to be somewhere near 1:50 to 1:100 titer, which as far as humans are concerned. In dogs and dog owners also 1:400 in endemic areas like India, but we found it near about 1:200 titer. Now, the main serovars, if you see here, in humans we found it as Australis and Autumnalis. In dog owners, it was ictrohemorrhagia and Grippotyphosa, and in dogs, it was Australis, ictrohemorrhagia, Grippotyphosa, and Autumnalis. So you can see the overlapping, which you can see as far as humans and dogs are concerned, as far as Australis and Autumnalis are concerned, and also Grippotyphosa. Now, when you see the commercial vaccine which we have, we don't have all these serovars in the commercial vaccine. So the protection, you can well imagine how much will be there against the prevalent serovar. We did a work on the farm workers in our university, and we found it to be 2.5% were seropositive. Another interesting fact, because of our high endemicity here, even at 1:200 titer also, there were no symptoms which were observed as far as our farm workers were concerned. Then recently, one of our PG students have done her work on cattle, because cattle has been implicated as the main source of endemicity as far as the large volume of urine is concerned in cattle. So Alappuzha district in Kerala is considered to be one of the main endemic areas for this particular disease, and we found that in cattle owners and healthy individuals, if you compare, the seropositivity was 28% in cattle owners and 14.7% in case of healthy individuals. And these were the predominant serovar in cattle was found to be Grippotyphosa, followed by Sergerae and Autumnalis. And these were the two panchayats which we looked into as far as Alappuzha district is concerned, and the cattle serum samples were positive for 52.2 and 29.5%. These were in healthy cattle. So the cattle do have a seropositivity, but the seropositivity was found to be below 1:100 titer. Now, this was our environmental work which was done as far as leptospira is concerned by another PG student, and we found that the prevalence of that was done by PCR, and was found that it was observed in both monsoon and summer season in all the different water sources as far as Kerala is concerned. Next, we come to toxoplasmosis. Now, accidental ingestion of oozes after cleaning of cat litter box is mainly considered as a source, because cat feces is the main source of toxoplasma infection. And accidental ingestion of these oozes in the contaminated soil leads to that. Even drinking water can lead to this particular infection. Now, if you see the average prevalent rate of toxoplasmosis among Indian pregnant women, it has been found to be 7.7%. And in a pilot study done in Kozhikode district of Kerala, it revealed a seroprevalence of 27.1%. Now, here one of our PG students have done the work on toxoplasmosis, and we found that in felines, we did the fecal samples, we examined under microscope, and then we saw that it was around 4.47%. We could detect this positivity as far as toxoplasma is concerned. Whereas in caprines, goat, the the seroprevalence was quite high. It was 41.30% when we go in by ELISA. And in humans, the seroprevalence was found to be 52.46%. From hospital samples from our local hospital, we collected and we found that the seroprevalence was higher in older individuals and women with gynecological problems. Another interesting thing which we found that the individuals having ocular problems did not have a very high, there was no high seroprevalence seen in those group, although toxoplasmosis have been related to ocular problems as far as symptoms of toxoplasmosis are concerned. Cutaneous toxoplasmosis, which leads to ulceronecrotic lesions, has been observed in case of humans as far as occupational risk groups are concerned. Another important disease, brucella. Now, brucella is always been associated with veterinarians as far as occupational risk is concerned. Two important species of importance as far as this disease is concerned is melitensis and brucella abortus. Now, potentially infected animals, contaminated biological materials, live attenuated anti-brucellosis vaccine are the risk factors as far as this particular disease is concerned. There have been studies which have been done in our college, and also recent study which tells that there is the prevalence of this particular disease among the veterinarians. Now, we have seen in case of farmers, that is goat farmers, the prevalence was 2.78%, and in goats it was 3.13%. And similarly, another study in veterinary students of final year, it was found to be 1.14%, and the general population was 2.45%. And Shom and co-workers in 17, they found that the veterinarians and para-veterinarians in Karnataka recorded seroprevalence of 7.04%. So it is there in the occupational group, so we need to be very careful. Now, this slide may not be very clear, but it is a recent research article in 2020 published in PLOS, which tells you about the different occupational groups. There is a red color is the rural workers, the orange is abattoir, green is veterinarian, blue is laboratory workers, and the violet one is hunters. So when you see in middle, almost in the middle, we see India. And in India, we have the green, which shows veterinarians. So most of the reports of brucellosis which has been reported in India has been from veterinarians. So in the year 2015 to 2016, which has been collected, it's a meta-analysis study over a period of time in different countries. And the red all shows the rural workers. So you can see in different countries, the rural workers are more exposed to brucella infection. When you compare brucella canis, abortus, suis, and melitensis, in veterinarians, the maximum infection is due to melitensis, followed by brucella abortus. Now, tuberculosis, we all know Mycobacterium bovis and Africanum is responsible for zoonotic TB in humans, and 10.5% of the human TB cases are associated with Mycobacterium bovis. And cattle can be affected by Mycobacterium tuberculosis by reverse zoonosis, that is from humans it can be transmitted to cattle. In Kerala, in elephants, there have been report of Mycobacterium tuberculosis spread from the handlers to the elephants. So that is a reverse zoonosis which is being happening. And veterinarians are at risk of attaining Mycobacterium bovis infection. So it can be through close contact, this aerosol transmission, and consumption of raw milk, which can lead to the infection. Next is listeriosis. This is one of the diseases which we have studied for a very long time in our department, and it's a foodborne disease and ubiquitous in nature. Now, we have done an epidemiological study in Kerala, and we have found that it is present everywhere, ubiquitous. So we have isolated from vegetables, meat, fish, aborted material of animals, human fecal samples, water, and soil. And we all know it's an immunocompromised status which lead to greater risk of severe listeriosis. So it can be an occupational hazard for veterinarians, animal handlers, and fish handlers. Now, fish handlers, in my PhD work, I found in one of the fish handlers, there was similar lesions which has been shown in the above picture. Similar type of lesion was observed, and the woman was, it appears very similar to a fungal infection. So that was there in our hand for a very long time, and we took the swab from that, and we found that Listeria monocytogenes was present in that particular lesion. So although it is there in different occupational groups, the only thing is we are not looking into that as far as this particular infection is concerned. So cutaneous listeriosis is one of the important infections which we see as far as occupational risk group is concerned. So this is the particular lesion. It's a pustular lesion on the skin of arms, hands, and then if remains untreated, it becomes sepsis results as far as this particular disease is concerned. Mainly during parturition, the glove tears and the hands gets exposed, then you get this particular infection. There are abortions in pregnant animal handlers are also been reported in different countries because of this particular infection. Next is Campylobacteriosis. Our department is now working on Campylobacteriosis, and it is one of the major foodborne pathogen next after Salmonella, and has been reported in animal handlers and veterinarians mainly because of ingestion and root, and symptoms are mainly gastroenteritis. We have found the prevalence of this particular disease in poultry and pig. In one of our PG students' research work, we found that the prevalence was very low in case of cattle. Now, this is another PG students' work which shows where we compare two pig farms, and we found that in piglets there was an initial excretion percentage, and then it increased at 10 weeks of age, and it was present in the adult pigs also. Then the adjoining things in that pig farm, that is the crow and egrets, the feed, the wallowing tank, the soil, the workers' hand, food saps, they were found to be positive for this particular Campylobacter species. Next, we come to the avian influenza infection. In avian influenza, we know we have had a major outbreak in 2014 in Kerala. Then we have another outbreak in 15. We had in 18. We have few reports in 19. So we did have in 20 also. So like that, we are having regularly avian influenza outbreaks as far as this particular disease is concerned. And H5 and H7 are the most commonly highly pathogenic viruses found in nature. And veterinarians, cullers, and poultry farmers are the occupational risk group because it doesn't get don't get an infection by eating a chicken meat sitting on your table, dining table, because we cook it so well about 70 degrees centigrade it gets almost killed. But we as veterinarians who are in the field, we can, through contact, through secretions or excretions of this particular birds, through aerosol route, we can get this particular infection. So we need to be very careful as far as this particular disease is concerned. Now, recent reports have been there for swine flu, H1N1. We had a major pandemic in 2009 for swine flu, and then it became human-to-human transmission was observed. Now, you must have seen a latest report on swine flu developing in China. Now, this was a research led by Hongli Sun at China Agricultural University in Beijing, and they've identified a strain that has already begun to infect humans, G4H1N1. Now, this particular strain, I just want, because it was in news lately, so I just put in a slide on that. It incorporates three distinct influenza strains. A strain similar to virus present in European and Asian birds, then a North American strain that has genes from avian, human, and pig influenza, and the H1N1, that the old pandemic strain which was there in 2009. So all this together, they have mixed together and they have found a new strain. Now this has been reported way back in 2016 in Beijing, and regularly they have been monitoring this particular infection over a period of time, and they have found now that the organism has started evolving, and then they are getting a lot of antibody titer as far as the pig farmers are concerned. So there is an area of concern as far as the swine flu H1N1 infection is concerned. In pig farmers, it has been found that people who don't wear gloves and smokers are more prone to swine influenza in one of the studies as noted here. Then we have the MRSA strain, that is methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus, which we all know because of this great AMR problem which we encounter worldwide. And we all know Staphylococcus aureus is a common bacterium colonizing the nasal mucosa. Now, the recent works have shown the prevalence of MRSA up to 4.6% in veterinarians in Netherlands. Although livestock are considered to be MRSA reservoirs, but there has been lately, because of our contact with different types of animals, we do have developed strains of MRSA. and this can lead to skin and soft tissue infections as far as this particular strain is concerned. In Belgium and Denmark, the prevalence of MRSA in veterinarians has been found to be 9.5% and 1.4%. So it is very much there as far as this particular disease is concerned. In our department, we have isolated MRSA strains from foods of animal origin, especially meat, way back from 2015. So good hygiene is very important if you want to get rid of as far as MRSA is concerned. Then ringworm infection, we all know it's dermatophytes and it leads to infection even on the intact skin. Now the major problem happens when you encounter rodents and cats because they are mostly asymptomatic, but they do have the infection and they can transmit it very easily to the occupational groups. So these are the certain pictures which shows you about dermatophytic skin lesions which you can have as far as humans are concerned. Now, same thing, hygiene, protective clothing, and routine sanitation is mainly required to get rid of this particular infection. Then we have aspergillosis. We all know it causes mycotic pneumonia in cattle and brooder pneumonia in poultry. And we, as an occupational group, can get exposed to materials which have fungal spores, which can lead to infection. So inhalation route is the main source of infection. And these are the different, and mainly the disease happens in immunosuppressed patients. So these are the different forms of aspergillosis which we can see. There can be allergic form, there can be infectious form, and there can be invasive forms which has been observed in immunosuppressed patients. Cutaneous larva migrants, not commonly seen in veterinarians, but there are people who work, animal handlers who don't use, who walk barefoot and on contaminated animal feces. When you do, and then the parasite gates entry and Calostoma caninum gates entry, and then you can see the movement of the parasite also. Then is chlamydiosis. Now it is called as chlamydophila. Chlamydophila psittaci causes infection in birds and Chlamydophila abortus in sheep and goat. And there can be different modes of transmission as far as our veterinarians are concerned. It can be through birth products, inhalation of desiccated excretions or secretion. Then infected birds can spread the bacteria through fecal or nasal discharge. Now, lately, sheep and goat also, this Chlamydophila abortus has been shown to have zoonotic transmission also. So, good hygiene and hand washing can be done as far as preventive measures are concerned. Next is erysipelas. So, Erysipelotrix ruseopathy. Now, we all know of its presence in the pig sector. We also have it in the chicken. So, in humans become infected through small injuries or wounds. So those small injuries, the organism gains entry and it produces lesions in the hand. Here you can see in this picture erysipeloid hand. So this erysipeloid is pretty commonly seen in pig handlers and veterinarians. And there has been a report of animal technicians who work in chicken rearing facility getting this infection when they handle sick or dead birds. Hantavirus, but it's more of a laboratory workers infection, veterinarians who work in laboratory. There can be different routes of infection from urine, feces, saliva of rodents, rat cell lines, etc. And the transmission is more during the winter months because there is low humidity and there is closure of circulation which is involved. It has been shown that in Korean hemorrhagic fever, which has been observed in professional staff like veterinarians and physicians in Japanese university, especially the people who work on with rats are more prone to this particular infection. Then we have pasteurellosis. Pasteurellosis, it's an infection caused by Pasteurella multocida, and in pregnant women from a cat bite has resulted in fatal congenital pneumonia, which has been reported, which shows its zoonotic potential. There have been a lot of cases of animal technician developing local abscess after a bite from a rabbit with rhinitis. In pig breeders also, there have been, from the oropharynx, there have been reports of isolation of this particular organism. So we need to be careful when we handle rabbits, cats, and when you go for pig farm work in pig farms, we need to be very careful about Pasteurella multocida also. Next is rat bite fever. That is also more common in animal technicians who work with rats. So Streptobacillus molliliformis is mainly responsible. There's another Streptococcus of late, Streptococcus suis, which is also present in pigs, which also produces zoonotic infection in pig farmers and veterinarians, which have been reported. Now, the Streptococcus moniliformis most frequently occurs from animal bites. So, agent is transmitted through urine or secretions in the mouth and or nares or conjunctival tract. And this organism, when causes infection, it leads to local infection, and if not treated, it can lead to severe disease. Anthrax, I'm not going into the detail, everybody knows about that. Cutaneous anthrax is the main form of disease as far as this particular Bacillus anthracis is concerned, and you get a typical carbuncle lesion shown in the picture as far as anthrax is concerned. Pox, we all know, from cowpox, which have been the major reason for development of vaccine against smallpox. So pox, other types of contagious pustular dermatosis, which is caused by pox, has been seen in humans being transmitted from animals. Then we have the psychological and social factors, which is stress. So psychological stress affects nearly 1 in 10 veterinarians, as reported by American Veterinary Medical Association. And the prevalence of mental illness has been found to be 5.3% in veterinarians and 4.7% in the employed US population. So that is a comparison which has been made. And 50% of the veterinarians with mental illness do not go for receiving treatment. So there has been several factors which have been related to this type of stress symptoms, which include workload, financial issues, long working hours, then challenging interaction, unexpected outcomes. So this has been associated with that. So the only 4 strategies which have been largely recommended as far as psychological stress in any occupation is concerned is the 4 A's, that is avoid, alter, accept, and adapt. If you're not able to avoid, you alter the situation. If you're not able to alter the situation, whatever situation you are in, you try to accept it, and after accept it, you adapt to that situation. So that is the only way out as far as psychological stress is concerned. Next is ergonomics. You can see the ergonomics of in this particular picture, how difficult it is. So we have different risk factors that could lead to musculoskeletal injuries, like awkward postures. We have different type of squatting, kneeling, etc., which leads to a lot of stress on the lower back. Then high hand force above the shoulders when you put your hand for different manipulations, especially in gynecology, that can lead to stress. Then highly repetitive motions in surgery, it can lead to carpal tunnel syndrome, very commonly seen in veterinarians, and forceful exertions and vibration. So the only thing which you need to do, it doesn't matter so much what specific movement you do, only that you take that time to release the muscles you are holding. So now and then you don't remain in a particular position for a long period of time, release the muscles, and then you can get rid of. So there are different veterinary standard precautions which should be in place to avoid this particular all types of hazards which I have mentioned in the presentation. It starts with hand hygiene. Nothing much to say about hand hygiene, because now it is very much in place after this COVID-19 situation. These are the areas, time when you should go for hand washing. Although we know that, but we tend to forget about this. One point which I want to stress upon is after removing gloves. So after removing gloves, most of the veterinarians or the laboratory workers will wash their hands.
Madam.
Yeah.
Madam, can you move a little faster?
Yeah. Please. Okay. There is a personal protective actions like gloves which we need to use. There is a protective outer wear, then face protections, then we have respiratory tract protections, then footwear protection, then is hospital environmental hygiene. So these are the things which we need to be in place to alleviate occupational hazard. So to conclude, I need to conclude that prevention is always better than cure. So be safe, be healthy. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions?
Sanjay sir and Prajit sir.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much and congratulate Dr. Menon madam for very good and informative, extensive lecture you have given, and you almost cover all the diseases which are contributed to the different occupation by the practitioners, veterinarians, those who are working in different field like slaughterhouses, in the private practitioners, in field veterinarians, right from the rabies to the anthrax and various diseases he has elaborated. And what are the things? Am I audible?
Yeah. You're audible, sir. Yeah.
So, what are the research you have done at your center, School of the Zoonosis and Public Health and Pathology? You have really presented all the work what we have done in the field, veterinarians, and the various contributing factors which are mainly involved in the prevalence and survival of the different organisms in the environment, and those who are causing the various zoonotic diseases into the animal as well as in the human being. So it was very nice presentation, and
Thank you, sir.
the content of the presentations were also very nice, and you are nicely explained all the things in better way. So can I one or two questions from the participant? Any questions from the participants?
Dr. Manoj, can you ask directly?
Hello. Okay, if not, I can ask one question, madam.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Madam, this leptospirosis also we are also experiencing every year in the month of the July to August in the season in Mumbai, because it is a Konkani region, and every time we are getting the cases of the leptospirosis in human as well as in animal, and we are conducting in collaboration with the medicos the zero prevalence of these various zero wars of the leptospira. And what you have pointed out in your presentation that, so what are the vaccines which are available in the field for the animals as well as in the human beings? So some of the vaccines, they are not having the different strains which are prevalent in the particular area.
Yes, sir.
And
that is a major issue. Yeah.
Yeah, that is the reason it is very difficult to control these cases of leptospirosis in human as well as in animal, and that is why there are certain deaths we are experiencing.
Yes.
So such kind of decisions we have taken in our government of Maharashtra also.
Okay, sir.
Because this leptospira model which was developed by the Gujarat government, that is very good ideal model. So that we are trying to replicate in Maharashtra also, and whatever the things which are very good in their model, so for the control of the leptospirosis in human as well as in animal, so that can be implemented. For that reason, we need to have the proper studies on the seroviral prevalence in human as well as animals, and in other reservoir animals also we have to see that. And then only it is possible to have certain vaccines and which has that different strains. Okay.
Yes.
So that kind of the studies you have done at your state level?
Sir, for the last 4 to 5 years, we have been doing the epidemiological study in healthy animals. We are not looking to the clinical cases. Only in the healthy population, we have studied in case of dogs. We have studied in case of cattle. And we have done a lot of work on environmental samples. So we have studied on different, we have got a lot of rivers in Kerala. So we studied in rivers, ponds, canal waters. And we were very surprised in the last study to find that many of the river waters do have pathogenic leptospires. So even in the summer months when the water gets comparatively less, so it becomes more concentrated and we get more of pathogenic leptospires in those particular areas.
Okay. And what about rodents?
Rodents, it is widely there, sir. We now and then our students collect rodents from farms and etc. And mostly around 50 to 60% is the prevalence as we do in MAT. We have also done isolation from rodents in our previous studies, and in rodents it is very much prevalent.
Okay, okay. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Any question from the audience? So my co-chair, Dr. Pijit, do you have some comments? Dr. Pijit?
Yeah. Is it audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So I think Dr. Vrinda Menon has done an excellent job in covering the occupational zoonosis. The topic itself is very elaborate, and we all understand that to cover the entire thing in a limited time of say half an hour, it's very difficult. I will just quickly summarize some crux of information which we got through this particular session. And we all know that we all are veterinarians and we are at risk of many occupational zoonotic diseases. There are many physical, chemical, and biological hazards we face in a routine life. And among the physical hazards, the vet should be aware of course, is I think one which prominent thing which has struck into our mind is the needle injury, the stick injury due to the needles. And I understand that ladies are more prone for stick injuries. Probably we just should train the ladies on stick injury because some 60% ladies are prone to show stick injury due to needles. Then, of course, even physical hazards, I mean, chemical hazards due to prostaglandins and formalin and all, ladies should be aware of, and even other veterinarians should, of course, be aware of the hazards of chemicals. Then, coming to the biological, it is very elaborate discussion was held on rabies. We all should take a pre-exposure rabies vaccination, and we also should see that we have a titer of minimum 0.5 international unit in order to maintain our protection level. And also in leptospira also we have seen the various serovars and how this commercial vaccines cannot give us a good protection level. We also seen the elaborative work going on in toxoplasmosis, and we have pretty high seroprevalence of toxoplasma in the study conducted in VBPH lab there, around 52% of toxoplasma. So vets should be aware of while, especially when you're dealing on treating with cats and other animals. Then of course we have seen about brucella, the tuberculosis, and in tuberculosis, nearly 10% of tuberculosis due to Mycobacterium bovis. So the human practitioners, I think few human practitioners are also here. We have to be aware that the Mycobacterium tuberculosis that we get from, we can also get from the animals, that is from bovis source. Then we have also seen listeriosis, especially cutaneous listeriosis. Madam has explained her experience with during a PhD time, wherein one fish lady got cutaneous listeriosis. Then we have seen about Campylobacteriosis, it's a foodborne pathogen. Then avian influenza, of which the main strain was H5 and H7. And of course, it's swine flu, and also Madam has covered the latest part, that is G4 strain of H1N1. Then we have also seen MRSA, living worm, aspergillosis, cutaneous lava migrans, chlamydiosis. Again, hantavirus is very important nowadays because we always think about leptospirosis whenever we come across rodent urine. But this, right from 2008, it has been reported in India, and we all have to look at hantavirus also whenever you overall leptospirosis. Then finally, we have elaborated psychological issues faced by veterinarians, and of course, it's interesting to know that mental is 5.3% of the case of psychological stress. And take home message for me is avoid, alter, accept, and adapt. This is very crucial information which I got because we are all facing so many stress in our day-to-day life, in our professional life. So this for information I will take to mind. And finally, we have seen last about the ergonomics and the postural defects which we have seen. So I think it was very elaborately covered, Madam. Thank you all. Thank you, ma'am, for this very interesting session on occupational zoonosis.
Thank you, sir.